Hello, everyone. Welcome to Or This. This is my Monday morning quarterbacking of the scriptures in the sermon for the previous Sunday, and this video is for Sunday, October 6th. I know I've taken a little bit of a break from doing the Or This videos, and so I'm back. So hopefully you can start tuning in, and hopefully these videos will be regular once again each week. So the scriptures that were assigned for this past Sunday were Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24. The psalm was Psalm 8. The second reading was Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, and chapter 2, verses 5 through 12. And the gospel was Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 16. So interesting scriptures for this week. I'm not going to delve back into what I talked about in the sermon. I'm going to go into what I was thinking about afterwards. An alternative way of going at the message for the day. I did, though, preach on Genesis 2, and I am going to mention what the point was of that, which was Genesis 2 tells the story of how originally there was one human being, but then God decided that that human being shouldn't be alone. This is a story that tells about basically the fact that human beings were not created to be alone, but were created to be in relationship. And so by the end of the passage, we now have two human beings to be together. And it does talk about the end of the passage, just talk about how a man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and they become one flesh. A bit of a kind of a leading into, well, how is it that there was, one male and one female, but now there's a human community. Male and female come together to procreate, to basically create the human community. But the basis of the story has to do with the fact that humanity is not created to be alone. We are created to be in relationship. And for that matter, we know that when we are alone, if not alone, when there are times when we feel lonely, and that is that longing inside us that we weren't created to be all by ourselves. And it's okay to be alone sometimes in our lives, but to go through life alone, that's not really what we're meant for. We are meant to live life in community, whether that be in family, with our family, with friends, with our neighbors, but whatever it is, we are meant to be in community. And I talked about this in the children's message, the fact that once the two are made, the man says about the woman, "This is my bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." And this idea that both are made of the same stuff. And there's an equality in that both male and female, both human beings, which means then all human beings, are made of the same stuff, bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. And we have that in common. And with that thought in mind, how does that help us to look around at those around us and see us more like equals, and rather than seeing us on some kind of a hierarchy of certain people being better than others or whatever. We are bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. We are the same. We are made of the same stuff. So none of us is made any better or any worse than anybody else. We are truly created equally in God's eyes. Which takes me to the gospel. And I'm going to talk a little bit differently about the message of the gospel passage here in this video. I did touch on the fact that, so in this passage, they're talking about divorce. And in those days, women did not have much power in society. So the men were the ones who kind of decided to marry a woman or decide to divorce a woman. And for that matter, the woman didn't have any support, financial support, unless there was a man in her life. So a father, a brother, or a husband. The problem is, though, if a woman was divorced, or if a husband divorced his wife, not only did that cut her off from his resources, which she needed to live, but it tended to also make people look down upon the woman, because for whatever reason, they weren't good. Maybe they weren't seen as being good enough or whatever when they're divorced. It was kind of it wasn't even like the male was looked down upon for being divorced, but the woman was. And so you have this inequality between male and female that, as we just read, was not creation. We weren't created that way. Even Genesis chapter 1, when it talks about, and Jesus quotes Genesis 1. He says, God made them male and female. God made both of them. God made male and female. So both are, and we know that both are made in God's image, for that matter. And so in the creation of human beings, God didn't create humanity to have a greater and a lesser human being, that men are greater than women, or more of value, or have a more even mind that they should be in charge of women because women get crazy. There's a lot of those kinds of ideas out there about why men need to be superior to women. But Jesus kind of says God created them male and female. Both were created by God. So anyway, of course, God created us for relationships, so God certainly doesn't have the intention that we should break off relationship. We all know, of course, though, that these things happen sometimes. So I did mention the sermon, I'll mention now. Even if people get divorced today, that doesn't cast them outside of God's care. In fact, God loves us all and is there to give us healing when we experience brokenness, whether it's physically or relationally. And so God loves us and is there with us through those challenges in our lives. But at the same time, the idea of marriage bringing people together in relationship, Jesus is saying God doesn't intend to see people break that off. And so, but I think in this case, we're also Jesus is also trying to remind them of the fact that there is no superiority here. I think another part of the reason why Jesus speaks against divorce in this particular case is because the religious leaders who asked the question present it as a man is allowed to write a certificate of dismissal and divorce his wife. So the male who has the power can break off the relationship that gives the woman the support that she needs to live. And Jesus acknowledges that problem as well. So, and what happens then later in this passage, it seems almost disconnected, is Jesus, people are bringing the little children to Jesus, and the disciples are trying to keep the children away. And Jesus is like, let the little children come to me, for it is to such as these that the kingdom belongs. And he blesses them and he spends time with them. And so the connection between the beginning and the ending of the gospel passage is really Jesus reestablishing the way in which God sees humanity, which is we are all created the same. Male and female are both created by God. Children are created by God just like adults. And we all receive the same regard from God as each other. We are bone of the bone, flesh of the flesh. We're made of the same stuff. So why do we create inequality amongst us? Jesus is teaching that there shouldn't be inequality, that we're all regarded the same. Adults and children, male and female, are all regarded by God. And then this really cool Psalm 8 has this really cool area where it talks about, when I consider the heavens and the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have set in your courses, what are mere mortals that you should be mindful of them, human beings that you should care for them? And then it says, you have made them little less than divine. With glory and honor you crown them. You have made them rule over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet. And so I bring it back then to this part, the way in which God has made us a little less than divine, has given us honor, to care for all that God has made. And again, there's no inequality in that. This is something, we are all made of flesh, all made of the same flesh, all made of the same bone, all made by the same creator, and all given the same role to care for what God has created. And we work together to do that. And we work on seeing each other as equal partners in that work. So those are some of the thoughts I had on the scriptures from this past Sunday. Feel free to share some of your thoughts in the comments. And I thank you so much for watching. God bless.